In this video, we're going to discuss some very concerning astrological signals which are now on the horizon and which point to the escalation of wars globally, everywhere where we have current theaters of war going on, as well as potentially the emergence of something that could be a new pandemic. So please make sure to watch this video and to prepare yourself and your families to make the right decisions and to be safe. All right, folks, so as somebody who works on a daily basis with astrology, obviously I look ahead and I try to see what's coming up in order to be prepared, to know and to prepare a couple of steps ahead of time. And unfortunately, there is one constellation coming up which, especially in our given situation, looks very, very concerning. And I'm talking about a Mars-Pluto opposition, which we're going to have in the sky for several months, starting in Q4 of this year and going into spring of next year. Now, on its own, having a Mars-Pluto opposition is not that dramatic. You always have Mars-Pluto oppositions at least once every 2 years. But this time it's different, and it's different because of something that in astrology and astronomy it's called retrograde motion. Now I'm going to show you what I mean and why this is so important that you can understand for yourself. It's the best to simply just show you the charts and give you a visual imagination of what I mean. All right, so here's a chart that shows you our current constellations in August and late August. And now I'm going to go ahead here, and you can see that right now we're here with the Mars Jupiter, right? So a lot of martial energy is there to expand things, to expand wars, but also to expand projects. You know, a lot of courage is around right now, a lot of bravery and venturing spirit and venturing energy. It's a good time to start ventures right now if you are in any type of venture that requires decision making and panache and drive. But now this Mars, as it moves out, it's going to go into Cancer, and then it's going to, over the next couple of months, first it's going to have a nice and harmonious relationship with Saturn, and then it's going to move sort of end of October and beginning of November-ish. It's going to move into the opposition with Pluto that I already mentioned. You can see this here, right? So Mars here and Pluto here in a direct opposition. Now again, on its own, this is not very crazy worrisome. You know, this happens all the time, right? But the point is, the challenge that we're all going to have to deal with is that this time Mars goes retrograde after a couple of degrees, right? It just kind of stalls. It's still in the opposition. So we're going here from October into November and then December. It's still in the wide opposition and then stalls. You see, it stops. It stops. You see here, the Mars has just stopped here. So instead of continuing on its path and moving out of this, right, it kind of gets very, very slow first, which is why it's so long in the opposition. Normally it would just be a couple of weeks or a week. It would be, and that's it. In that week, you know, some people are, you know, going to break things and attack, and some violence is definitely, you're going to see violence, increase in that week. Even statistically, you'll be able to see violence increase in that week. There was a guy, French guy, Gauquelin. He did statistical studies. He did a lot of statistical studies, and he proved, basically, he showed that under certain constellations involving Mars, you have more violence and you have, you know, certain martial qualities. People born with Mars on their ascendant, they're going to be better athletes and so on and so forth. He proved this statistically, but it's a long time ago. Now it should be updated. It's really time for an update with all the data science and AI that we have right now. It would be so much easier to generate statistical studies and to show people that there is very clear correlations between the constellations and events that happen on Earth. But now, be that as it may, I'm just throwing this idea out there for somebody to pick this up. If you do, hit me up and let me know what you're doing, you know, maybe we can collaborate, but this is not my battle. Somebody can do this. Now, the constellation that you have here, it's going to be in place for a really long time, exactly because Mars goes retrograde here, right? You see this? So Mars goes retrograde, and then it just comes back slowly like this and goes back into the opposition. So now January, we're back into opposition, exact opposition, right? So this is January. This is already several months of opposition, right? And then it sort of stops again. It stalls again, right? It's still in the opposition, still in the white. It just comes out of the opposition a little bit here in January, comes out a little bit, and it's now in a very wide, it's kind of out of the opposition, but that doesn't last long because by March, April, it comes back. In April, it comes back, and in April, we have kind of the grand finale of this opposition. End of April 2025, we have the grand finale with the direct opposition again here, right? So apart from that couple of weeks, apart from that few weeks where the opposition was out of aspect, we're basically talking about several months from end of October till April. We're talking about half a year of opposition action between Mars and Pluto. Now, Mars and Pluto, Mars is the aggression principle. Mars is the smaller malefic. Mars is about things breaking and going to war, fights and arguments between people, violence erupting, and inflammation, and anything to do with flames, and also drive to get things done and to push things forward, positively seen. And Pluto is kind of the higher octave of Mars. Pluto is that dark, deeply seated, rooted shadow power that wants to swallow everything up, and that also wants to destroy, but in a different way. That wants to kind of destroy through manipulation and through domination and through deep power. And when those two are in an opposition, well, that doesn't bode well for world peace, to say the least. It's the quintessential signature for hostilities. Now, for hostilities to erupt, for people to go to war, for people to go to, for people to fight, and for fights to become very ugly. But now, as if this is not enough, this is not just the only thing that we're looking at. Actually, this very constellation, it's also hitting very precisely and very exactly the charts of many of the main players on the global stage right now. And this is really what makes it so much more worrying, makes it so much more worrying than it already was on its own. So the first one I'm going to show you is Russia. And in the chart of Russia, this constellation, it's actually going to hit a very worrying point. Let me just redo my picture here a little bit so you can actually see this. And as you can see here, so Mars moves currently into the 12th house of Russia, where over the next couple of months, Russia is going to be a little bit muted in its attacks and in its military strategies. It's going to kind of prepare. And then once this happens, and end of October, November, Mars is going to be here on the ascendant exactly. So this opposition that we talked about with Pluto and Mars, it's exactly on the ascendant-descendant axis of Russia. So this means we've got half a year of Russia being far more aggressive, right, than right now in defending itself, in attacking, in everything. And on the other hand, here with Pluto on the descendant, that's the overwhelming force of the enemy that's experienced as something that needs to be confronted and attacked. So we've got months of this energy of the Mars-Pluto hitting exactly Russia's axis of myself and my enemy, right? And what else? Who else is here? This goes on and on and on, as I already told you. We've got here Vladimir Zelensky. So Zelensky obviously is in a really tight spot right now. Nobody knows if he's even going to make it that far and that long. But if he does, then this is going to be his end game. That's it. That's going to be his end game. I don't give him too much time to live this through and to survive this whole thing. But he's going to be on his Mars. You see, this is his Mars. His Mars is already opposite Pluto for years now, for a couple of years now. And this whole opposition thing, the Mars will be on his Mars, right? So we've got several months of this Mars-Pluto opposition on Vladimir Zelensky's Mars. So his personal drive action will be directly involved. He will face potentially personal violence against himself. Personal violence, right? So doesn't bode well for him. You know, he seems to have houses somewhere in Florida and in Israel, you know, not in Israel, in Florida and in Switzerland. That's where his houses are, right? So maybe he gets away and can save himself, or maybe not. But be that as it may, it's going to get pretty harsh and pretty tough in that region of the world. Now, on to Israel. That's why I was saying Israel. On to Israel. Where does this Mars-Pluto opposition that we have for many months, for half a year almost, where does it land? It lands on Israel's axis of MCIC. You see here? The MCIC. Pluto is on the bottom of Israel's chart right now, transiting here at the bottom, which means the whole nation and the whole, you know, existence of the nation and of the statehood is going through a massive challenge and a massive transformation, potentially a destruction in the coming years when Pluto will actually be opposite the moon. That's very, 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 dangerous territory. But this Mars-Pluto is going to be on the ICMC, on basically the statehood of Israel and its public perception in the world as being a warring nation. So that's that. And who else? Who do we have to look at in this context? Obviously, the Iranians, and Iran is also tied into this, totally tied into this, because that same Mars-Pluto opposition that we just talked about, in the case of Iran, it's going to be for several months on where? On Iran's Jupiter. You see here? Jupiter is here. This is Iran's Jupiter, and this is where Mars will be. And it will be there for several months. And Jupiter of Iran is in the 12th house, so it's hidden, right? They're doing like big things in secretly. Iran has a lot of secret things going on, right? So this looks for me like Iran will extremely ramp up its protection and its support for the networks that they have, all of those networks of paramilitaries and militias and so on that they have all over the Middle East, in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and so on and so forth, because the Jupiter is in the 12th house. But it means definitely a vast expansion of martial energies, of war energies for Iran as well. Mars on Jupiter for several months. This is typically a very victorious constellation. So Iran is going to make some big moves during this time. Now, who else? We've got the USA, the United States chart. So the United States obviously is going through, have some very important event happening in this time span. Namely, what? The election. The November election is exactly in this window. And when the Mars-Pluto opposition clicks, you see here's the Mars-Pluto opposition that's going to be in for many months. It clicks on the U.S. natal Pluto, because the U.S. is obviously going through a Pluto return currently. Pluto return, right? Pluto return, we know about this. The U.S. has been going through a Pluto return, which is this process of reinventing yourself and shedding a lot of layers of the deep-seated collective identity, and it's going to go along with very, very painful power struggles and very, very deep transformation, the deep state and deep identity issues and battles for power and all of these things that we've been seeing in the US. And all of this is going to get triggered with this Pluto-Mars constellation to become much more violent, unfortunately. Violent. Imagine that level of tension and strife and deep clashes that already exist right now with the Pluto return in America. And imagine adding to that Mars for months and months and months, just hitting that Pluto for months, ongoing, basically making people violent. So these are not These are not easy times at all in any sense of the word for us. And unfortunately, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I wish I had better news, but as worrying as this is already, as concerning as this is already, this is still not all. Mars-Pluto, unfortunately, I have to say, also in astrology, archetypically corresponds with pandemics. It corresponds with disease. Pluto stands for diseases that are very deep, diseases that are, viruses are signified by Pluto. And Mars in opposition to Pluto can also stand for a violent expansion of diseases globally. Now, there have been some news on a new health concern that have been shared by the World Health Organization. And I have a lot to say about that. But due to reasons that you may understand, this is not the platform to share my information with you on this particular topic. So I will share in the comments below to this video the link to where you can find that information, that unfiltered information, which needs to be somewhere else. I'm sure you understand why. And there you can inform yourself, and you can stay in the know, and you can prepare yourself for what's coming. It's very important that in these coming times, we prepare ourselves and our families. We understand where we are. We understand where we should be. We understand where our loved ones are. We understand how we should be prepared for what's coming. And we have contingency plans. Now, if you want to work with me directly, and if you want to develop strategies and plans for yourself, for your personal resilience, for your financial resilience, to know where to take yourself, where to take your assets, how to prepare yourself, we can do that. I'm going to give the links as well below for how we can start to work together. And in the coming videos, we're going to investigate in much more detail the different elements and aspects of the confrontations that are going on right now, the different theaters of conflict that I mentioned. Each one of them obviously has its own dynamics. We're going to look at those as well. And I'm going to as well discuss strategies for resilience that you can discuss, that you can implement yourself. Astrology is a great tool for this because it gives you that additional level of information. It's that cosmic GPS that's added to the rest of the data that you have and allows you to make the best decisions. Now, on this note, with this very concerning video, I want to end it on a good note. I want to say that if you are worried, if you are concerned personally, if you have fear and anxiety, always know that if you are with the Lord Jesus Christ, you will be taken care of. You will be taken care of in a way that neither astrology, nor strategy, nor finance, nor no other human tool or method or mean will be able to. And that's your ultimate refuge for yourself and your family. Because throughout all the tribulations, God will take care of those who stand with God. Now, I wish you all the best and be blessed.